The acronym VARK is a well-known classification of learning styles. The V stands for Visual Learning Preference, A for Auditory Learning Preference, R for Reading, Writing Preference, and K for Kinesthetic Learning Preference, which involves movement. The idea behind this theory was that when learning material is presented to students in sync with their learning style, they assimilate the material better. But in 2008, cognitive psychologists Charles Pashler, Mark McDaniel, and two others tasked with evaluating this claim. And generally speaking, the claim of the learning styles concluded that there was no significant improvement in student performance when courses were taught according to their preferred learning style. However, when adapted to the subject matter, for example, visual for geometry or geography, or reading or writing for a writing-intensive subject, it led to better learning. Here is what they wrote exactly. When the teaching style matches the nature of the content, all learners learn better regardless of their preferences for how the subject is taught. This is the 5th episode of a series on the science of learning, inspired in big part from the book Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning, by 3 authors, one of which was in the team of psychologists who worked on the project of evaluating the actual efficacy of teaching students depending on their learning styles. His name, Mark McDaniel. Now, what they did find as individual differences that were very important in learning were, among other things, the ability to structure and the ability to extract rules. And those are going to be the main focus of this episode. The ability to structure. People with a strong ability to extract big ideas or key point learn better than those who have less of that ability. They can set aside distracting details to build a structure of the most important elements. This inhibitory capacity helps them establish a solid foundation to accommodate subsequent knowledge elements. What's great is that ability can be cultivated. And I know this not only because research says so, but also because of all the things I've experienced growth in these past years. This is by far the thing for which I experienced the largest and the most impactful effect on my life. I've experienced a drastic development of my inhibitory capacity over the years. So how do people who have less of that ability can develop it? The answer is pretty straightforward. Questions. When questions are integrated into a text or learning material, they help individuals with low structuring ability build a mental model of essential ideas. Over time, and with enough self-practice, people can get really good at asking themselves the right questions while going through any kind of learning, even real-world practical learning. And that habit alone starts to automatically create structure in their understanding. And yes, we're circling back to episode 1 of this series, self-testing, and episode 2, the habit of reflection, pausing throughout and at the end of a learning session to think and recall. Doing this consistently and engaging in the effort of recalling answers, you eventually reach a point where after reading or watching anything, you can mentally see and clearly articulate the structure of the material. And that happens even if you didn't consciously ask questions while going through it. Because it seems to me that what happens is that, at least for me, the brain does that unconsciously without you knowing. You just see the results. And this is why parents who every single day insistently ask their children what they did at school are doing them a great good. They're not just helping them reinforce what they learn in class, they're doing that, but they're also helping them develop their ability to structure knowledge. A few years ago, my structuring ability was average at best. The way I structure things now has absolutely nothing to do with how I structured things before or even during my undergrad years. So what changed? Books and note-taking. So here's what I did practically speaking. Let's say it's Monday and that I read a chapter of a book. On Tuesday, before continuing, I summarize what I read the previous day, of course without having the book open. It's hard at first, you struggle, you forget things, but that's good. Remember, forgetting is good. Over time, something shifts. You stop getting caught into small random details. You learn to first build the structure, and then once the structure is clear, you layer onto that structure the relevant details. It becomes second nature. Now, the ability to extract rules. A problem for you to solve. There is an inoperable tumor which can be destroyed by focused radiation. However, the radiation must also pass through healthy tissue. A beam of sufficient intensity to destroy the tumor will damage the healthy tissue through which it passes. So, how can the tumor be destroyed without damaging the healthy tissue? While you're at it, the ability to extract rules is about figuring out, fleshing out the underlying principle at work in any given situation in order to infer the rule it entails to apply it in another situation or other situations that are similar enough. Now, have you come up with an idea? Here's another problem for you. A general's forces are set to attack a castle that is protected by a moat. Spies have learned that the bridges over the moat have been mined by the castle's commander. The mines are set to allow small groups to cross the bridges so that the occupants of the castle can retrieve food and fuel. So how can the general get a large force over the bridges to attack the castle without tripping the mines? These apparently unrelated problems are very much similar. A strategy problem, one in medicine and one in the military. They have been used in real studies on rule learning because they share the same underlying solution. And here is the interesting part. Many people cannot solve these unless they are prompted to look for similarities between those two problems. Once they do, the pattern emerges. First, a large force needs to reach a target. Second, that force can't be delivered through a single path. And smaller portions can go through different paths safely. And therefore, to split the force into smaller parts and send them along different paths and have them converge on the target simultaneously, that's the solution. And once people discover it, they're suddenly able to solve other similar problems across completely different domains. So, what this tells us is that people who struggle to extract rules can train and develop this ability by studying simultaneously two or more similar examples side by side. And research confirms this. When learners are asked to compare problems and look for common structures, they improve their ability to generalize and transfer what they've learned to new situations. The authors of Make It Stick put it very beautifully. People who, as a matter of habit, extract underlying principles or rules from new experiences are more successful learners than those who take their experiences at face value, failing to infer lessons that can be applied later in similar situations. And likewise, people who single out salient concepts from the less important information they encounter in new material and who link these ideas into a mental structure are more successful learners than those who cannot separate wheat from chaff and understand how wheat is made into flour. With these two key elements in mind, how to become an aggressive learner. Before Make It Stick, I viewed tests as tools to categorize learners to determine who was the smartest. I wasn't aware of the evolving nature of some components of intelligence, and it was somewhat fearful whether during self-testing or competitions or quizzes, or even when I was trying to shoot a basketball while people were watching. But since getting acquainted to the idea of dynamic testing and imbuing my being with the idea, tests appeared to me so differently. It is simultaneously so simple and deep. Tests are ways to identify my weaknesses and strengths, whether I give them myself or someone else gives it, for anything from learning a martial art, playing an instrument, to taking a statistics test. It might sound cliche, but it's like a liberation once it's embedded in your way of being. You be different. Questions are answers. Without tests, there is no learning. Testing, reflecting on your experiences, which is a form of testing yourself, is about inevitably becoming stronger because through the process, you discover what you don't know, and working on that makes you better. It's exactly what psychologist Robert Sternberg refers to as dynamic testing. Breaks it down into 3 clear steps. Step 1, a test, perhaps an experience or a written exam, that shows you where you are, where you have gaps in your knowledge or skills. And then a second step, that's a commitment of yours to becoming more competent using reflection, practice, spaced learning, and effective learning techniques. And step 3, retesting yourself, paying attention to what works better now, but also and most importantly to what you still need to work on. And the cycle continues as this new test shows you your strengths and your new weaknesses. This perspective reframes testing entirely. Unfortunately, many education systems promote the very antithesis of dynamic testing by emphasizing the permanence of mistakes. It turns grades into final verdicts. And when grades matter more than growth, real learning takes a backseat. You get feedback on an essay? Oh, it's ignored as long as the grade is good. Corrections on a math test? We glance at them only to check if points were awarded fairly and summed up correctly. In the next episode, I'm taking a segue into the brain, intelligence, and its relation to learning. At the end of this episode, you probably feel like you've understood it very well. But how can you be sure? You can find the episode illustration downloadable in the description, along with the PDF file summarizing it. Bye.